I want to thank you all for being here today. General Hoke, it's great to see you again. And Mike Casey, good to see you as always. Congratulations on both of your nominations to be respectively the Director of the National Security Agency, or NSA, and the Director of the National Counterintelligence and Security Center, NCSC. I want to also recognize your family. I know General Hoke has got both his wife Sherry and his daughter here, and Mike has got his wife Sarah here. Although there are a series of former staff members from the CISI from both teams. I'm not sure whether they're here to root you on or fully disclose. When we say if anyone here, speak your piece or forever hold your peace, if we'll see what happens at that point. But congratulations to both of you. General Hoke is a career intelligence officer who has served for 31 years in the United States Air Force, the Joint Forces, and the intelligence community. Currently Deputy Commander of the United States Cyber Command, General Hoke previously served as Commander of the 16th Air Force, Commander of Air Forces Cyber, and Commander of Joint Force Headquarters Cyber at Joint Base San Antonio, where he was responsible for more than 44,000 personnel conducting worldwide operations. General Hoke, you have an impressive background. You've also had very big shoes, as when Senator Rubio and I got with you yesterday to fill in replacing General Paul Nakasone. It has been one of the great opportunities of my tenure as ranking member, now chair, to work with General Nakasone, and we do wish him all the best. Obviously, as both soon to be head of the NSA and head of Cyber Command, you have enormous responsibilities. I look forward to hearing more from you about how you plan to make sure that NSA and Cyber Command are continuing to be poised to deal with a wide range of cyber issues, some of which is mostly the China hack on Microsoft and the ramifications that has real time. Obviously, Mike Casey, to members on both sides, and I'm not sure it's a good sign or not that so few members from the majority decided to show up for this hearing, but Mike needs no introduction to the members or staffs on the committee. He was brought over, former Chair Feinstein brought over Mike from the House in 2016, served as staff director. When I came in as vice chair, I asked him to stay and then stay on as chair, and what a wild ride it's been. I think about our work and with so many of the members who were here on the bipartisan Russia investigation, which took enormous amounts of effort, and I think generally his understated style, the fact that he knows virtually everything and everyone in the IC has been a real asset to this committee. And the fact that he has got the former staff director from the Republican side here is at least a validator or something is an indication, I think, the kind of bipartisan approach that we desperately need. I think you'll be a great choice to be the director of the NCSC. We all know the whole notion, in my mind, and a lot of the work on this committee, of national security is changing. It is no longer simply who has the most planes, ships, tanks, and guns. It really is, and again, this committee has done a lot of good work on this. It is about technology competition, whether on subjects that are current interest like AI, but it includes quantum computing. It includes the work this committee's done on 5G. It is a host of areas, and again, both of you will have responsibility in those domains. Obviously, cyber becomes increasingly an enormous challenge in everything that we do, not only on the national security side, but basically on the whole runnings of our economy. And we've got to make sure that we are well prepared. As we've seen, and some of the interest we've seen about China's recent hack into Microsoft, these authoritarian regimes are not backing off in terms of their competition with us and competition with free nations around the world. In both of you, you're going to have responsibilities to take on this challenge, whether it be China, whether it be Russia. These are issues that are not going away. We also know, and this is something that, again, this committee, I'm proud of its work, took on a pretty unsexy topic a few years back of security clearance reform. We've got to make sure we continue to get the best and brightest people in a orderly process through a security clearance that both invites people in, but also does the appropriate background checks that we need to make sure the kind of incident that we had with the accused Mr. Shara doesn't happen again. And again, many of us on this committee are working on not only security clearance reform, but the whole notion of how many things are classified and how we go through a more rational declassification process. So I am very excited about both of your nominations. We're grateful for your potential service and for your family's willingness to be supportive. We believe that the intelligence community is the backbone of our national defense, and you're both going to play an extraordinarily important roles should you be confirmed. Very, very big jobs. On a personal note, I just want to say to Mike, thank you for your help educating me in the intelligence community. Thank you for your wisdom, both to encourage me on some projects to take on and discourage me strongly on others. I'm grateful for that service, and I'm, while reluctant to see you go, I think you're going to do an extraordinary job for our country going forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to the Vice Chairman.
Well, thank you both. First of all, I always thank everyone that appears before us for their willingness to serve in these positions. General, thank you for your service to our country writ large, to both of you, really, because you've done that in public service in different ways, but now your willingness to step up to these important roles. As the chairman said, Mr. Casey's not a stranger to this committee, and yet, despite the fact that he's so well known, I think he might even have a chance to be confirmed, so we'll see as this plays out. You know, I think one of the most interesting things about this hearing is it really goes to the very foundation of what this is all about, what we do in the intelligence community in our country. We spy on people. We spy on other countries, particularly, and their leaders and their governments, and they try to spy on us. A lot of what we gain, and for the purpose of our national security, some of the most foundational intelligence this country's collected continues to be through technical means. And that's what, General, you would be stepping up to do here. And it's critically important. It informs not just the IC and the Department of Defense. Frankly, it informs all kinds of public policy that allows them not just to see what's coming in a month or in a year, but what long-term trends could be like. It is perhaps in this era in which so much is interconnected through technical means, it is about the most foundational piece of intelligence that we collect on a regular basis and informs all the other agencies. It serves everyone in that regard. And so it's critically important, A, to protect those capacities. As you know, we're coming up on the end of this year on the need to reauthorize what is basically at the heart and soul of our ability to collect on foreign targets in 702. And it's something I hope the current administration will prioritize their efforts to move on that, because we are running out of time here to get that done. On the counterintelligence front, I think that's been as challenging as it's ever been in modern time. We are, and both are facing a return to an era of great power competition. It's a phrase that's thrown around a lot, but I got here in 2010 where the singular focus, not just of this committee, but the national security apparatus was counterterrorism, and it remains a challenge. But now it's increasingly about China and Russia, but also what's happening with North Korea, a rogue state with nuclear weapons, Iran and its ambitions, this emerging alignment of countries around the world who may not be our enemies but aren't going to be our allies and are looking for different ways to leverage the international stage to their advantage and play both sides. And but embedded in that is a real counterintelligence challenge for two reasons. The first is, with great power comes the ability to also do technical collection. But the other, that it's increasingly challenging for us because propaganda and disinformation and influence operations have existed in the case of every war fought in the last 5,500 years of recorded history. But never before has it been so easy to do at such a low cost. And I think that as in the realm of counterintelligence is the effort to drive messages that divide and pit Americans against each other, that seed information into our ecosystem in which free speech is protected by our Constitution in ways designed to demoralize and undermine our willingness to fight, and in many ways our capability to unite behind important causes. And that has to be balanced with the reality that that we still need to ensure that our intelligence agencies can never be turned upon our citizens. In fact, the worst moments, the most dangerous moments in the history of our intelligence community have been when it was revealed that they were spying on people who were against the Vietnam War or political enemies of those in office. I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about in the 70s and 60s, 70s, and 80s, to the point where those revelations almost destroyed our intelligence agencies in our country. So whether it's the foundational elements of our intelligence collected through technical means or our ability to withstand not just great power competition in terms of counterintelligence, but the influence operations of not so great powers, but who have the ability to do that, whether it's through cutouts, through different methods that they use. We face unique challenges that look very different than they did 10 years ago and that are rapidly evolving. So you're both stepping into these roles at a critical time for our country, for the future of geopolitics. So I'm thankful for your willingness to serve and look forward to hearing your testimony and answers today.
I'd like to thank the Vice Chairman. And now I'm going to ask General Hoke and Mr. Casey, I'm going to ask you both to stand and raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear to give this committee the truth, the full truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please be seated. I will now go about asking you the 5 standard questions the committee poses to each nominee who appears before us. Actually, I'm not sure whether these 5 questions started with you, Mike, or with you, Chris, but all things come around. They just require a simple yes or no answer for the record. 1, do you agree to appear before the committee here or in other venues when invited?
Yes.
2, if confirmed, do you agree to send officials from your office to appear before the committee and designated staff when invited?
Yes.
3, do you agree to provide documents and other materials requested by the committee in order to carry out its oversight and legislative responsibilities?
Yes.
That's an important question. We had some challenges on that more recently. 4, will you both ensure that your office and your staff provide such materials to the committee when we request it?
Yes.
And 5, do you agree to inform and fully brief to the fullest extent possible all members of this committee of intelligence activities and covert action rather than only the chair and vice chair?
Yes.
Thank you very much, both General Hoke and Mr. Casey. We'll now proceed to your opening statements, after which I'll recognize members by seniority for 5 minutes each of questions. The floor is yours, gentlemen. I'm not sure which of you have decided to go first.
Chairman Warner, Vice Chairman Rubio, and distinguished members of the committee, I am honored to testify today for my nomination as Director of the National Security Agency and Chief Central Security Service. I want to thank President Biden, Secretary Austin, Director Haynes, and General Milley for their trust in nominating me for these critical positions. I'd also like to thank my bride, Sherry, who has served with me for the last 31 years. I would also like to thank our children, Michael and Chandler, who sacrificed as military children and are now thriving as adults. Michael was a captain and company commander in the North Carolina National Guard, and Chandler is a commercial cybersecurity analyst. Sherry and I are incredibly grateful for their sacrifices to enable our service as a family. I also would like to thank General Nakasone and Susan Nakasone for their service to the National Security Agency. General Nakasone has 36 years of dedicated service, culminating as DERNSA for the last 5 years. His commitment to both the mission and the people during a time of unparalleled global change has continued the legacy captured in the agency's watchwords: defend the nation, secure the future. I truly believe the nation is defended and the future is secure due to his leadership. A special thanks to Susan Nakasone for her commitment to her family and for her willingness to focus on and address tough issues facing Army and agency spouses and families. I'm a career intelligence officer who has served 31 years in the United States Air Force, within the Joint Force and also the intelligence community. My service in command and staff positions at all levels, to include multiple assignments within NSA and the cryptologic enterprise, have given me a deep appreciation of NSA's critical importance to the nation. I am honored to have been nominated to lead NSA and serve with its incredibly talented professionals. NSA's excellence in signals intelligence and cybersecurity create unparalleled advantage for the nation. If confirmed, my focus will be to strengthen that advantage. As our nation's competitors seek to reshape the international order and challenge our military advantages, we must leverage our competitive strengths: people, innovation, and partnerships. I believe every great success starts with the people. NSA has great people and an incredible mission. To sustain that success, NSA must continue to attract diverse talent from across the nation while also providing the environment where they can thrive and develop. If confirmed, I will ensure that whether an individual stays for a few years or dedicates their entire professional career to NSA, people will continue to be our foundation and legacy. Technology continues to advance at an incredible rate. I have always been impressed with how NSA successfully innovates to remain on the cutting edge of technological advances. Its culture of innovation, its highly skilled workforce, and its record of success in applying artificial intelligence and advanced computing posture it well to adapt and apply the latest technologies to further advance its mission. Throughout NSA's history, it has learned the great value of partnerships, a lesson significantly reinforced by recent experiences in response to Russia's unlawful invasion of Ukraine and initiatives to meet the near and long-term challenges of the PRC. NSA's ability to work in collaboration across the interagency, the private sector, and with foreign partners is one of the agency's greatest strengths and critically important to our nation's success in a world of accelerating change. If confirmed, I will focus on ensuring the health and effectiveness in NSA and its world-class employees in delivering outcomes against national priorities by delivering foreign intelligence, ensuring cybersecurity, protecting national security systems, and providing combat support to the Department of Defense. I will focus on strengthening the workforce, ensuring a culture of compliance, investing to leverage new technologies, and prioritize threats facing the nation, especially the pacing challenge posed by the People's Republic of China. In closing, I am humbled and honored to be considered for these positions. The nation faces challenges at unprecedented scale. If confirmed, I look forward to teaming with this committee to posture ourselves to quickly seize opportunities to meet and outmaneuver these challenges. Chairman Warner, Vice Chairman Rubio, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. I look forward to answering your questions.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee, I'm honored to appear before you as the nominee to be the Director of the National Counterintelligence and Security Center. I'm deeply grateful to President Biden for nominating me for this position and to Director of National Intelligence Haynes for her recommendation. Like all of us, I'm only here because of the support and efforts of others. I'd like to thank in particular my parents, Robert and Carol Casey, for raising my brother, sister, and me, and instilling in us a desire to do the right thing, work hard, and make a difference. My father passed away last year, but without the example he set for me throughout his life, I would not be here. My wife, Sarah McLean, who's sitting behind me, and my daughter, Erin, who could not be here, have been unstinting in their support over my career, and as I've moved through this process, I really couldn't do it without them. I'd also like to thank those senators and members of the House who brought me onto Capitol Hill and provided examples of what true public service really looks like. I began my service 28 years ago in the House, working for Representative Kerry Meek and then Representative Vic Snyder. From them, I learned what members dedicated to helping their constituents and making hard decisions look like. Chairman Ike Skelton asked me to join the House Armed Services Committee and entrusted me with responsibilities far in excess of what I deserved. Ranking Member Adam Smith, one of the smartest members of the House, provided a constant example of how the best members struggle with the difficult issues and do their best to make the right choices for the country. 7.5 years ago, Senator Feinstein asked me to join the staff of this committee as the then minority staff director. I remain deeply grateful to her for giving me that opportunity. And I'd like to single out Chairman Warner for thanks. He kept me on as his staff director when he ascended first to vice chairman and then chairman of this committee. As everyone here knows, he's one of the most energetic and dedicated members of the Senate, constantly interested in pushing to find new ways to do more to help the country, often much faster than the Senate or the entire United States government is capable of handling. Thank you for never accepting that there are limits to what we accomplished, if only we push a little bit more. I've been fortunate to serve as a member of two excellent committee staffs, that is the House Armed Services Committee and now the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. From the moment I started to the day I left, I never stopped learning from the other staff members on HASC, who were always among the most professional and experienced staff members I ever met. Serving as the minority staff director and now staff director of this committee has been one of the greatest honors of my life. It's not always been a smooth ride, but the staff on both sides of the aisle have struggled to always do it right and provide bipartisan effective oversight of the intelligence community, almost always in ways that the public will never hear about, but would deeply appreciate if they did. I would be remiss if I didn't thank the current and former members of this committee for their work also. Joining CISIA is often thankless, resisted by your personal offices and your campaign staff, and no one who isn't dedicated to ensuring U.S. national security would ever agree to do this. Former Chairman Burr probably provided the best example of this, dedicating almost his entire time in Congress to serving on the intelligence committees and spending untold hours with the men and women in the IC, working constantly to make the community better. Finally, I'd like to take a moment to thank the men and women of the Capitol Police who guard the doors of the committee and, more importantly, become part of the CISI community. The community couldn't function without them, and we don't remember that often enough. I've spent my entire professional life in public service on Capitol Hill, working almost exclusively on national security issues, from the war in Iraq to Afghanistan, terrorism, Iran sanctions, covert action, and the other important matters this committee works on but can never talk about. I'm particularly proud of the work this committee undertook, in which I played a small part, to investigate Russia's investigation to interfere in the 2016 election. When we started, I don't think we envisioned that it would take 3.5 years and become the definitive counterintelligence look at that episode. As it turned out, counterintelligence has become a growth business for this committee and the entire country as we face an unprecedented level of threats from foreign actors. In addition to the traditional intelligence threat posed by Russia and other foreign intelligence services dedicated to stealing the government's secrets, a broad array of other hostile actors has emerged. China's ongoing and massive effort to steal U.S. intellectual property and that of our allies threatens the basis of our past success and economic future. North Korea has become a center of hacking for profit, and at the same time, Iran has expanded its own cyber capability, as well as showing its ability in traditional espionage. And of course, non-government groups like hackers not only steal for profit, but we've seen them rent or lend their services to governments. These threats, and many others I didn't name, will only be exacerbated by emerging technology. We're already seeing how artificial intelligence can enhance malign influence efforts and potentially assist hackers in their efforts. Other technologies like quantum or synthetic biology or autonomous systems could have similar impacts. At the same time, those emerging technologies and many others, like advanced energy, are essential for the economy of the future and continued U.S. success in the world. The National Counterintelligence and Security Center at ODNI sits at the center of many of the efforts to combat these threats and protect emerging technology, leading and supporting critical counterintelligence and security efforts across the IC, the United States government, and even the private sector. If I am fortunate enough to be confirmed as Director of the National Counterintelligence and Security Center, I will seek to ensure that our nation's counterintelligence efforts are integrated and effective, accelerate the work currently underway, and I might add strongly encouraged by this committee to reform the security clearance process, enhance ongoing efforts across the United States government to protect our supply chains, especially in the digital space, and continue the important work started by past directors in this committee to educate the private sector and academia on the threats they face from foreign actors and to help those private sector and academic institutions protect themselves. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee, thank you again for your consideration of my nomination. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you both for very good opening statements. And I would ask each of you to kind of lean into the mic a little bit to make sure that we can hear. I've got a couple of questions for each of you. And again, to remind members, we're going to do not by order of appearance, but we're going to do by seniority in 5-minute rounds. And you can go ahead and start the clock. I'll make sure I adhere to that 5-minute effort or try to. General, I want to echo a comment that Senator Rubio made. We desperately need to get 702 reauthorized. I'm going to ask you, in your experience, how that has been a useful tool, not just in terms of the counterterrorism efforts of the decade past, but on a going forward basis in terms of our near-peer adversaries. I think in many cases we have not done a very good job, the IC and the FBI and to a degree the administration, in making clear that the 702 we're talking about today is very different than the 702 that was reauthorized back in 2018. There have been improvements. We need to do a better job of documenting that. But can you speak to the important role that Section 702 plays in terms of protecting our nation?
Thank you for the question, Senator Warner. In terms of Section 702, it is a critical authority for the intelligence community to be able to target foreign persons overseas to be able to collect intelligence that provides critical foreign intelligence on cybersecurity, counterproliferation, counterterrorism, and a whole host of threats. In my experience, it's absolutely essential. As I have reviewed products, in every product that goes to the senior leaders of our government, Section 702 has an impact. It's a critical authority, and it is also critical that as we use that very necessary authority, I've also seen through my experience with the National Security Agency a culture of compliance to ensure that through every execution of that authority, that the protection of civil liberties of Americans is a cornerstone of how that's executed.
Well, I agree, and I want your commitment that I believe when you are confirmed that you will help keep the pressure on the balance of the IC and particularly our friends at the FBI on not only making the case of how essential this tool is, but also the level of reforms that have been put in place. Very briefly, because I want to make sure I can get to Mr. Casey as well in a question or two. But one of the things that we've had conversation with General Nakasone a number of times, The fact that we may not have seen from Vladimir Putin the level of all of his cyber tools, the fact that we have not, the Ukrainians have really stepped up, companies like Microsoft to help in the private sector. But in light of the fact that we've seen the recent China hack on Microsoft, how do we make sure that we stay abreast of particularly near-peer adversaries like China and Russia?
Senator, I think first and foremost, the National Security Agency, in terms of its role of foreign intelligence and be able to inform on threats, is critical. But the power of partnerships, and as you have seen over the last few months, the work that has gone on collaboratively between CISA, FBI, the National Security Agency, foreign partners, and also industry to produce very clear, unclassified, releasable advisories on how China is targeting our critical infrastructure and service providers is a good example of how to do that collaboratively to be able to illuminate those threats that attack our economy and potentially our national security.
Well, thank you. I think you mentioned this, Mike, in your opening comments, but I want to get it again on the record. Should you be confirmed, you will continue to work with this committee on our security clearance reform efforts?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. Yes, closely and often.
All right, good. All right. We're going to hold you to that. Why don't you share? I mean, I'm not sure. I know the members of the committee and many of the folks who've worked with you here in the audience, but I'm not sure all of the members of the public fully understand the role of the NCSC. Briefly, can you describe and what you think your priorities would be should you be confirmed?
Sure. The NCSC plays an important role in developing policy, overseeing counterintelligence efforts across the United States government. It focuses mostly on counterintelligence. They have a Center for Security Evaluation, the Special Security Directorate, which does personal vetting. There's a fair amount of supply chain work that they oversee and coordinate across the government. They essentially provide that function for the DNI that coordinates the IC in all.
And what would be your goals with this entity should be confirmed?
If I'm lucky enough to be confirmed, I mean, I think, as I said in my opening statement, one, I want to ensure that our counterintelligence efforts are fully coordinated. There are a lot of players in that space, and we need to make sure we cover the waterfront in an appropriate way and evolve to meet the evolving threats. Two, to continue the work on the security clearance stuff that you already mentioned. I think there's a great deal we can do to forward that work. And then three, the Director of National Intelligence has asked me, in particular, to look at supply chain, particularly with regard to cyber, the cyber contents of what software the government is using is of deep interest and concern to her.
Well, let me, my final question is, and I want to make sure the press sees this for the record. We have this picture here. Is this actually a photo of you undercover? Will you validate whether this is really a picture of Mike Casey or not? I'd ask all of my
I don't think I can comment on that, sir.
committee members. Well, we'll take that in consideration when we come to the vote. With that, I turn it over to the Vice Chairman.
Maybe he has a body double just like Putin. I don't know. That's what I read in the Guardian anyway, or whatever those tabloids are. Let me start with NSA. This dual hat issue, and we've raised that in our conversation, meaning that you would take, you're at Cybercom now, but now also the NSA. First, I'm just curious to the extent that you know the answer to this, and I think you do. To what extent does Cybercom now, today, currently rely on NSA personnel to execute its mission?
There is a really good collaborative relationship between Cyber Command and NSA. There are NSA personnel that serve within Cyber Command that those dollars for every individual are reimbursed by U.S. Cyber Command. That partnership has been incredibly complementary to the execution of NSA's missions and really see that as a comparative strength for our nation to have the dual hat leadership of both the NSA and Cyber Command.
And the reason why this has come up is the issue of the delegated authorities, where U.S. Special Operations Command and Cyber Command are the only two unified military commands that can operate under NSA delegated signals intelligence authorities. Now, while I think we have the use of these delegated authorities at SOCOM is well understood, the use of those delegated authorities at Cybercom, I'm not sure we could describe it or even write it in terms of having a clear understanding. As the Deputy Commander of Cyber Command, what's your awareness of the oversight and compliance standards used by the command in executing the Delegated Signals Authority?
Senator, as U.S. Cyber Command does execute signals intelligence authorities. It follows every rule aligned or provided by the National Security Agency, and oversight is conducted inconsistent with all of the rules that govern signals intelligence and closely coordinated with the National Security
I guess
Agency.
the fundamental question is, why does U.S. Cyber Command have raw SIGINT access when such access is limited within the broader IC? What's the argument in favor of that?
Senator, the overlap between activities in cyberspace and within signals intelligence, those things are inextricably linked. And the partnership and how we've developed that to be able to leverage the authorities both within U.S. Cyber Command and the National Security Agency have been a power and have really been an enabler for outcomes for the nation. And I think as we walk through that, if confirmed, I will certainly be committed.
Yeah,
to
I mean, you
ensuring your
didn't design the
visibility.
infrastructure, so we're not blaming you for it. You just have to, I think from our perspective, it's simply that when it translates over to Cyber Command, our ability to conduct oversight over intelligence dollars and activities becomes severely constrained in many cases. And I think that's the problem that we're confronting on a regular basis in that regard. In the past, we've raised that concern, and I think it's one you'll wrestle with, right, as we come into this role. And Mr. Casey, on the, and I think you're aware of this because you've worked on it, but there is no authoritative definition for offensive counterintelligence or strategic counterintelligence. And the committee, and you're well aware of what we've been working on in terms of a committee report on this, thinks it's really important to establish these terms to better define the counterintelligence responsibilities within the intelligence community. And as you know, those recommendations are forthcoming. I think you're pretty aware of what those are going to be. In your view, what is the best way to define offensive counterintelligence and strategic counterintelligence?
Thank you for the question, sir. As you note, the committee struggled with this and may address it in a forthcoming committee report that may be voted on in the near future. As you note, there's no government-wide definition of either, and I think the committee staff and the committee members struggled with a definition. Ultimately, didn't put it in law, but suggested that the Director of National Intelligence provide one. I frankly, having some knowledge of what the committee's definition was and some input into it, I think those definitions are pretty good, and if it's okay with you, I'd frankly just read them. The offensive counterintelligence means clandestine counterintelligence activity conducted for national security, strategic, and counterintelligence purposes against the target having suspected or known affiliation with a foreign intelligence entity to counter clandestine activities that threaten the United States or the national interests of the United States. And strategic counterintelligence means the processes and product of developing the context, tradecraft, capabilities, knowledge, and understanding of the strategic environment, including the intentions and capabilities of foreign adversaries and the national resources necessary to engage in counterintelligence activities to support United States national security interests, policy development, and planning processes. I think as the committee struggled with it, I think we all agreed we're not sure it's a perfect definition. It's a pretty good working one, and there's probably some utility in having it.
It sounds like a pretty wise definition to me. You would agree the DNI should just take it up and just implement whatever we put in that report, right?
Seems like an excellent thing for her to consider. So.
All right, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rubio. Senator Feinstein.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like a moment to speak about Mike Casey and his nomination to the director of the National Counterintelligence and Security Center. For those members of the committee who might not know, I originally hired Mike Casey to be the staff director in January of 2016, while I was the vice chairman for the committee. Mike did great work that year, overseeing several classified items, including several counterintelligence issues. And then we were lucky. Senator Warner decided to keep Mike on as staff director when he took over as vice chairman in 2017. Accordingly, we have had the ability over the past 7.5 years to observe Mike and I find him fully qualified for the position. Mike, well done, and I think we all look forward to your confirmation. Let me ask this question. Can one of you give us a sense of the effectiveness of Russian cyber efforts on Ukraine and our ability to help the Ukrainians in countering them? What else should we do?
Senator, in terms of Russia's capabilities, they have certainly used a number of cyber capabilities against Ukraine. Ukraine gets great credit in terms of how they prepared for what they have expected and experienced from Russian cyberspace by partnering with NATO members, by partnering with various elements of the U.S. government, and also with U.S. industry. They were much more resilient to these cyber attacks. They continue today. And we would expect that Russia will continue to use every cyber capability that they have as part of their unlawful conflict. And wherever we can provide assistance, we should continue to do that, Senator.
Thank you very much. I think that's good advice. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Risch. Senator Cotton.
Congratulations, gentlemen, to both of you for your nominations. Thank you for your past service and for your ongoing service. General, we've already talked a little bit about Section 702 because it's coming up for reauthorization. You talked about how significant it is to the work of the agency and to our national security. To put it in very plain terms, 702 is about spying on foreigners in foreign countries, right?
Yes, Senator.
And the reason why it implicates America at all is that it can either be passing through an American telecommunication system. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
So you have, say, one Iranian bad guy in Vienna and another one in Bangkok, and they decide to use Gmail, for instance. It allows you to target with a requested Gmail their communications.
If it's a valid foreign intelligence target, yes, Senator.
And a second reason why it might implicate America when we're dealing with foreigners and foreign soil is that bad guy in Iran or working for Iran around the country may be speaking to a bad guy here in America as well.
And if the target is the foreign target, yes, Senator.
Okay. So this has obviously become a very heated controversy, and there's some question about whether it can be reauthorized or not. But the nub of the controversy is not that first category, I think, but the second one, right? And the prospect for what's known as reverse targeting.
And that is not authorized under 702.
It's not authorized, I understand. Can you explain to us how you go about ensuring that something that's not authorized doesn't actually happen?
In my experience, Senator, there are very strong procedures for ensuring that the target of the use of 702 is a valid foreign intelligence target, and that target is overseas. There are a number of series of oversight mechanisms that I've had experience with in terms to ensure that not only is that always the case, but if there is a mistake or an inadvertent action, that it's immediately reported both to Congress and to, of course, the National Security Agency.
Can you get into a little more detail about those oversight precautions to ensure those abuses don't occur in this setting, or is that something that you're uncomfortable discussing?
I think, Senator, I can talk broadly in my current role about what I have seen from the National Security Agency, which is a culture of compliance. That a group of Americans that want to protect their fellow American civil liberties and do that in a way that's consistent with our laws, our policies, and our values. To go into the exquisite detail, Senator, what I'd request is, if confirmed, I'd like to come back to you and have a conversation.
That's fine. We're all human. Mistakes happen. Sometimes abuses happen. Some of those abuses have been widely reported in the news. If such a thing happens, what mechanisms do you have in place to identify such mistakes or abuses, and what kind of corrective actions are taken in those circumstances?
Senator, I think what NSA laid out with ODNI in the transparency report lays out just those use cases. That if there was something that has happened inadvertently, it's reported, the number of times it's occurred, and ensuring that is reported back to the court as well as to the Congress.
Okay, thank you. If confirmed, I think you probably still have a little bit more work to do, and probably in a classified setting with members not only of the Senate but of the House as well, to get 702 reauthorized.
Yes, Senator.
Mr. Casey, I want to view a conclusion about the NCSC. NCSC, as the U.S. government head for counterintelligence, lacks a clear mission as well as sufficient and well-defined authorities and resources to effectively confront this landscape. Moreover, NCSC's placement within the Office of Director of National Intelligence may hinder its ability to scale and respond to threats in an agile manner. Despite these challenges, there is no consensus among counterintelligence officials on the way forward for the NCSC. Are you familiar with that statement?
I believe it came from the committee's audits and projects team. Look at NCSC.
It's from our committee and their take on the NCSC. We made 17 recommendations to try to improve NCSC. Do you agree with all of those recommendations?
Broadly, yes. I think the one that was sort of taken under advisement and be considered as the placement, whether it should be an independent agency. There are potentially advantages to it. There are real disadvantages to it. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, I think our nation vitally needs a strong and effective NCSC, especially for the threat that we face against China. And if confirmed, I hope that you'll be able to pursue and implement as many of those recommendations as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see both of you. And I'm trying to keep a straight face looking at Mr. Casey, who's worked so hard and so well with us for so long, and congratulations. Let me start with you, Mr. Hoke, if I might. With a few exceptions, NSA currently requires a probable cause determination for U.S. person queries of communications collected pursuant to Executive Order 12333. My question is there any reason that standard couldn't be applied to communications collected under Section 702 of FISA? And one of the reasons, I mean, you can see the interest here in the committee with respect to 702. I don't understand why, if it works for 12333, it doesn't work for 702. And it would certainly provide more protection for Americans who are concerned about their privacy rights. Your thoughts?
Senator, I share your focus on protecting American civil liberties. As in my experience of working with EO 12333 collection, I've got a good understanding of that. What I would ask, Senator, in my current role, I am not in the details of how each 702 authorization is executed. I'd ask to be able to come back if confirmed and have a conversation with you about it.
Let's speed it up a little bit, though. I'd like a written answer why we couldn't have that before the vote. Can you get that to us within a week in writing?
Yes, Senator. If confirmed, I'll do that, Senator.
No. We need to have your assessment of it before we vote within a week.
Understood, Senator.
Can you do that?
Yes, Senator.
Great. Thank you. Let's talk about your role as functional manager for cyber. General Hoke, the NSA director is the functional manager for signals intelligence, which means the director develops and implements IC-wide policies, practices, and procedures for SIGINT. Does this role extend to computer network exploitation?
Senator, the overall responsibility of the SIGINT functional manager is to direct and have oversight of all SIGINT collection, processing, analysis, and reporting and dissemination of SIGINT products, and that includes computer network operations.
So you're the point guy with respect to all of those things that the public usually thinks is hacking.
So in terms of using all of the tools of the United States SIGINT system, the director of the National Security Agency is responsible.
Good. On encryption, every day it becomes more and more obvious that American security, their safety, and their well-being depends on strong encryption. If you're confirmed, will you commit that NSA will not seek to insert backdoors into or otherwise weaken encryption technology used by Americans?
Senator, the encryption is a critical responsibility of the National Security Agency. It's critical to defend our national security systems and our weapon systems. If confirmed, it will not weaken encryption for Americans.
That's an important statement. So on your watch, encryption is going to be preserved.
Yes, Senator.
Very good. Let me ask one other question, if I might, on the definition of signals. General, last October, there was a new executive order on signals. And 2 weeks ago, the IC issued a whole array of procedures implementing that executive order. What's missing is any intelligence community-wide definition of signals. That makes it hard to know what all these procedures actually cover. In your view, should there be an intelligence community-wide definition of signals? And I know that we've had some discussion up here already about that.
Senator, in terms of where the definition of signals intelligence is defined, it's defined in National Security Council intelligence directives, in EO 12333, and in United States SIGINT Systems intelligence directives. They are all very consistent in terms of what comprises SIGINT, in terms of communications intelligence, electronic intelligence, and foreign instrumentation signals intelligence. So I think there is a common definition that is aligned across the executive branch.
I continue, as you and I talked about in the audience, in the office, with respect to the lack of a consistent IC-wide definition. I know we'll continue that, and I look forward to particularly getting your response in writing, that question I asked about Section 702, before we vote in the committee. And I appreciated your candor in the office. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No questions for Mr. Casey? Senator Cornyn.
I'm going to liberate.
Congratulations to both of you for your nominations. I don't think it's an overstatement to say we're living at a time of, certainly in my lifetime, unprecedented distrust of our government institutions and challenges to those institutions. Unfortunately, some of that, I think, in the case, for example, of the FBI, is justified by the abuses that occurred in recent years that we all are familiar with and been well documented. And I know Director Wray is committed to attempting to regain the public trust. And indeed, there's one thing both of you should be happy about today, and that is you're not in the House of Representatives where Director Wray is testifying today, and your name isn't Chris Wray. But I just want to get an understanding from you, General. How can the American people be confident that these incredible tools, which you said are essential to the mission of NSA and Cyber Command, how can they be assured that these tools will not be abused to their detriment?
Senator, I think it's incredibly important, if confirmed, is to build the trust and confidence that for myself as a leader, that you will trust the inputs, because I know I have faith and confidence in all of the individuals in the National Security Agency. In my experience, incredible workforce that is focused on the protection of their fellow Americans. And they do a service to their nation every day, and the ability for us to provide transparency on their activities is something, if confirmed, that I would like to be able to partner with this committee on.
And Mr. Casey, as you're well aware of the concerns about the FBI's activities, since you're going to be so involved in counterintelligence matters, oversight at the DNI, I'd be interested in your views about the FBI's unique role. They are a law enforcement agency, but they're also a counterintelligence agency. And in the course of dealing with some of this lawfully collected intelligence on on people overseas, occasionally a U.S. person's name will come up in that and even potentially be used in the course of a investigation that has nothing to do with the counterintelligence matter, but other law enforcement matters. What's your view about how we do best to try to regain the public's trust that the FBI, as the primary counterintelligence agency for the U.S. IC, isn't able to use that lawfully collected foreign intelligence for an improper purpose against a American citizen or a U.S. person, which of course, as you know, is more broad than a citizen?
Thank you for the question, Senator. First, NCSC is not an operational part of it. They are very much a strategy, oversight, and policy.
But you're supposed to integrate counterintelligence security missions areas under one organizational construct.
Correct, sir. But other agencies actually carry them out.
So you won't be part of the operations, but you will be part of the
correct and
oversight.
The NCSC's purpose in devising all counterintelligence strategies, plans. One, there's a heavy involvement in the Civil Liberties Office. There's a real attempt at transparency, and I think To your question about the FBI, as much transparency as humanly possible on how the FBI operates is probably the best way to regain the trust of the American people. I know as Congress considers 702 reauthorization, there are a number of proposals for increasing that transparency or putting limits on how that information that's collected can be used, and there's certainly work that can be done in that area.
Well, part of the conundrum in trying to convince the American people, much less members of Congress, about these authorities is a lot of the information that would demonstrate the necessity of that is classified information by its nature. And I know the DNI and others have attempted to declassify certain things that they could to give us the information we can use then to make the case why 702 should be reauthorized. But I think we've got a very heavy lift on our hands, and frankly, it's going to start with the House of Representatives. We're going to have to make some changes with the FBI's authority, particularly as regards U.S. citizens and U.S. persons when they use lawfully collected 702 information for law enforcement purposes. But finally, let me just ask you, General, since we talked about this yesterday, you know it's a big concern of mine, given the incredible responsibilities of Cyber Command and NSA, the global responsibilities, and all the hot spots in particular you have to prioritize. I'm worried that we are losing the war on counter-narcotics efforts in Mexico and South. And I worry that we don't have the bandwidth we need for the NSA to provide the intelligence that we can then use with our partners in the region to go after the bad guys and to cut off the flow of some of these narcotics. Could you share with us some of your thoughts about how we might be able to augment those current authorities or the means by which those authorities are exercised?
Senator, it's an important question in terms of counter-narcotics, specifically fentanyl, and what that has meant to our nation. That is certainly a mission that is a responsibility from a foreign intelligence perspective of the National Security Agency to understand those threats. And if confirmed, I'm committed to be able to work that and also to look for new partners to be able to collaborate with to be able to address that threat.
Thank you. Senator Heinrich.
I want to start just by thanking Senator Cornyn for that last question, because I think it's a really pressing issue that deserves your focus. Lieutenant General Hoke, this has been covered a little bit, but I want to return to it and just make sure I understand your plan for moving forward. A number of pre-hearing questions asked about Section 702 FISA collection and the compliance regime that NSA has in place for its Section 702 collection authorities to ensure the protection of U.S. persons in particular. So in your answers, you largely deferred to the current NSA leadership, stating that you have limited familiarity with the issue in your current role with Cybercom. And I have to say, I don't view that answer as good enough. I'm disappointed. NSA very much depends on FISA's Section 702 authorities to collect the communications of critical foreign intelligence targets throughout located outside of the United States who use our U.S. infrastructure and services to communicate. And especially with 702's expiration looming, it would simply serve you well as the nominee to lead the NSA to demonstrate more than a limited familiarity with those procedures and compliance governing the protection of Americans' data. So I would just ask for your commitment to expedite that process, to become very familiar with that compliance regime as you seek the confirmation.
Senator, I absolutely agree with you that this is the priority issue in terms of being able to understand to a granular level of detail how this is conducted. If confirmed, this is my first priority to be able to understand that.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm going to pop over to you, Mr. Casey, very quickly. And, you know, I certainly don't have to tell you about the importance of promoting supply chain security for increasing American competitiveness, for driving innovation. What's the role of the NCSC in preventing and mitigating foreign state or even non-state actors from compromising U.S. supply chains?
Thank you for the question, Senator. NCSC it's one of the major roles that NCSC has. An entire directorate is dedicated to supply and cyber chain issues. And as I mentioned, particularly on the cyber supply chain, it's one of the DNI's highest priorities moving in. For me, where I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed to move into this job, the NCSC is the lead for supply chain issues for the IC and throughout, frankly, the United States government. Having said that, there's a lot of players in this space. And so an important part of that is coordinating the efforts, ensuring that lessons learned are shared among the agencies and sometimes with the private sector.
Talk a little bit about that. How do you plan to make sure that NCSC keeps ahead of advancing technology in order to provide threat awareness information to industry and, for that matter, federal and other partners?
Thank you, Senator. First, with the caveat that as I've not been confirmed, I'm not deeply versed in the NCSC's current efforts. But I think the single biggest question is understanding what the current efforts of the United States government and various different parts of it are. DoD has a number of efforts ongoing. Other parts of NSA has efforts ongoing. I think should be a big effort in understanding what the waterfront looks like at the moment and ensuring that we have adequately covered it. Frankly, if I'm lucky enough to be confirmed, I'd like to come back to you with a better answer of the next 2 or 3 steps we could take.
Well, we'll look forward to that. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Let me just, before I go to Senator Langford, we have heard from both Senator Cornyn, Senator Heinrich, and obviously Senator Wyden as well on 702 concerns. One of the things that we just have to do a better job as we ask our colleagues to reauthorize this critical tool and convince the American public. Again, there are many changes in terms of FBI operating procedures, but also at NSA operating procedures that are very different than they were even a year or two ago, let alone what we reauthorized in 2018. And we just have to do a better job of documenting that and making that case. That's an editorial comment, obviously, but for those of us who understand the importance of this tool, we got some work to do. And I do think making clear how the decrease in inadvertent contacts or the number of people that may actually receive a victim notification through a 702 tool is a case we've got to make. Senator Langford.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thanks to both of you and for your service already to the country and what you've done. General, I want to be able to zero in on some of the things that Senator Cornyn brought up as well on the counter-narcotics work that's happening currently. There are a lot of threats that Americans have around the world. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, but people feel what's happening on the streets, and 100,000 families are dealing with a family member that died from illegal narcotics that came into the country last year. So we feel this threat faster than we feel other threats on it. What I'm interested in is what your commitment is to be able to actually go after the information and the infrastructure that's actually bringing these drugs in that are killing Americans every single day.
Senator, I agree with you. This is a national security issue. And from a national security agency perspective, the role of foreign intelligence to be able to understand the threat and communicate that threat to elements that can take action, that will be a priority, Senator, if confirmed.
Okay, I appreciate that. We'll follow up on that in the days ahead. Unfortunately, every director that's a recent director of NSA has dealt with a major security breach within the agency. So you get to walk in and say, okay, not on my watch. So let me just ask you, as you approach trying to deal with how we're not going to have a security breach on your watch, what are your first thoughts about what to do different, how to be able to deal with this?
Senator, the protection of our national security information is critical. Right. Classified in and of itself by its very definition, if disclosed, causes great harm to the nation. So this is paramount for leaders in the national security community. For me, I think about it in 2 different ways. Personal accountability, so we need to make sure that we have the highest talent, and I'm very confident in the talent we have in the National Security Agency. We have to ensure that continues. And then we have to have technical means to ensure that we are able to be confident in the oversight and the control of classified information. So if confirmed, I'll review all of our current processes and ensure that from a national security agency perspective, that we're doing everything we can, and then we'll partner with the rest of the national security community and the intelligence community to ensure that we're sharing what we believe are best practices.
Yeah, that'd be helpful in the days ahead. Obviously, there's work to be done. Every director has said that. It's a challenge. You're dealing with a lot of people and a lot of complexity, and having the opportunity to be able to verify what's out there and what's not out there is important. there's been this balance between contractors and full-time employees. It's much faster to hire a contractor. They can get people in immediately and to be able to take care of it. A lot of them have experience in the IC community before, and they're able to get there quickly on it. It's hard to be able to get full-time folks that are there, and then there's different sets of rules on it. How will you strike that balance between the contractor and full-time?
Senator, I do believe it's a balance. And we have to ensure that there are things that from a national security agency perspective, the workforce with the mission focus and the technical capability is a critical asset to the nation. And having them be able to do inherently government functions and to be able to do that in a world-class way is certainly the priority in terms of being able to sustain what world-class foreign intelligence and cybersecurity that NSA provides.
Okay. We're going to count on that in the days ahead as well. You were asked a question just in the pre-questions about describing your view on when it's appropriate to withhold pertinent and timely information from the Congressional Intelligence Committees. You answered appropriately. It's not appropriate to withhold information that's within the jurisdiction of a congressional committee. That may seem like a silly question, but the challenge that we've had around this dais, both sides of the aisle, have been that we would have a hearing in a closed door setting. We would go through all the different issues, and then within 24 hours, something would be in the New York Times that was not discussed with us. That was clearly known, and it became an issue of we just didn't ask the right question at the right time. And it was like, I would have told you if you would have asked me directly, but we don't know whether to ask people directly. So I think the basis of this question that was coming to you was, we don't want to have to know how to ask the magic question. If there are issues that we need to be aware of, we need to know. And it needs to be forthcoming in an opening statement from you and to say, hey, this is something that's on the horizon. Are we still okay with that?
Senator, if I'm confirmed, I commit to a partnership to ensure that you have the necessary information.
Thank you. We appreciate that very much, and we look forward to that partnership. Mr. Casey, I need to know, is this nomination really a discreet way to get out from under Senator Warner's authority?
100%, sir.
That was what I assumed. That was the question that had not been asked to you directly on this. I do want to ask just a philosophical statement from you as well, because the counterintelligence efforts, and you approached this in your opening statement as well, is you made the statement, counterintelligence efforts, I'm going to abbreviate some of it, is to deflect, understand, anticipate, and hopefully deter foreign intelligence efforts. I want to drill down on the last of them. Philosophically, strategically, what does it mean to deter foreign intelligence efforts to you?
Thank you for the question, Senator. The way I think about it is success looks like when we get intel that the foreign intelligence services went somewhere else to try to steal secrets, that they thought it was too hard here and they were too likely to get caught. And that covers a variety of efforts across the security, counterintelligence, offensive counterintelligence activities, but that when we put those things together, they just decide they can't operate here.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that and appreciate your engagement, obviously your service here to the committee as well, and the way you've handled so many issues in the days ahead as you're dealing with private industry and talking about threats that they're facing. I would encourage you to do what has been done in the past and to make sure that private industry is fully aware that any of their cooperation, their data is voluntary in the way they share that and engage, and so that their rights are also protected because they're a victim, not now suddenly to be victimized by their own government again by having to share information in ways that are not comfortable or PII and such. And so there's this strange balance that you've got to be able to work to be able to help protect those companies, individuals, and American citizens as the attack is coming to private business, but also protecting the rights of those individuals as well.
Thank you for that, Senator.
Thank you.
And while I will take issue with his characterization on Mr. Casey, I would say I want to double down on your comment to General Hoke. I mean, you're going to find no better ally than this committee. But that trust, and it's happened with many of the folks who've appeared before us, disappears if we don't ask the magic question and we then subsequently find there was a piece of information that somebody had and didn't reveal to us when they had an opportunity.
100%. And may I remind you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Casey was under oath when he answered that first question. So.
Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, I want to focus on a word that you used 4 or 5 times in one of your first couple of answers, and that word is collaborate and collaborative. The cyber conflict is different than conflict in history. We're not talking about Army against Army and Air Force against Air Force, Navy against Navy. We're talking about 85% of the target space in the private sector. So collaboration and really a new level of trust and collaboration, it seems to me, is going to be necessary. Is this something that you believe that in your history with the military, you will be able to transition to having that kind of relationship of trust and collaboration with the private sector and NSA when you take over that position?
Senator, this is an important issue, and I think it's been enabled both by the Congress and by the Department of Defense to have that collaboration within industry, both from U.S. Cyber Command and the National Security Agency. The ability to share directly with industry while also teaming with our teammates in DHS and FBI has been a really critical enabler. NSA has been enabled by the department to do a partnership with the defense industrial base and build a collaborative relationship to share information in both ways from a threat perspective. And NSA has also begun to provide cybersecurity services to the defense industrial base. Those are the types of partnerships that, as we see those initial indicators, those are the potential things that, if confirmed, I'll look at how do we scale that.
Well, you have to. I think your answer is exactly right. But the resulting product of this is a kind of collaboration that doesn't come naturally to either side, and trust has to be established. And I hope that's something that's also in your calculation. As Senator Langford said, the companies have to feel comfortable and in a trustful way to share this information with you. I was asked a question this morning in a public forum about Ukraine and why we didn't have more cyber attacks from Russia as a result, because everyone was expecting. Part of it, as you testified, was the Ukrainian skill working with us and the work that was done to help them defend their networks and to be more able to be resilient. But part of it, I said publicly, I think the Russians were afraid of Paul Nakasone. There's a deterrent effect that is very important. The concept that he established was called defend forward. Do you subscribe to that concept that we have to have a deterrent that adversaries feel that coming against us in a cyber attack of some kind is not a free lunch?
Senator, I think we need to engage our adversaries if they're conducting activities that are malign and have a negative impact on the national security of the United States or a negative impact on our allies and partners. And that ability to do that and the ability to put pressure on them, expose their activities, while also making our allies and partners more resilient is absolutely critical every day so that they know that they're contested.
Well, and the key phrase you just used was they know. It's not a deterrent if they don't know it, if they don't know that we have the capability. And I think you have to be aggressive in terms of letting our adversaries know that if they attack the United States in cyberspace, there will be a proportional and hurtful response.
And I think from the, if confirmed, Senator, in the roles that I will play, it'll be my role to be able to produce options that are also consequential and ensure that across how we integrate with all the other elements of our national capabilities to be able to ensure that we do have a realistic deterrent and to be able to present that.
Well, I hope to see intelligence over the next several years where one of our adversaries said, we better not do this because we're afraid of that General Hoke guy. So that's a mission. Insider threats and counterintelligence. If I think back to our major intelligence briefs, going back to Aldrich Ames and after that, we cannot possibly vet people to the point where there is a zero chance of somebody turning on their country. Therefore, you mentioned technical means, General, and I was surprised, for example, in the recent case that we didn't know when information was being exfiltrated from a classified system. Are we working on technical means to have a greater grasp of our secure information rather than hoping that the people that we have hired will never succumb to whatever the temptation is to betray their country? Let's start with you, Mike.
Thank you for the question, Senator. Not sitting in the seat, I don't know all the details, but my understanding is there's a certain amount of agency by agency. Different agencies have implemented things.
Could you come closer to the mic, please?
Sorry, different agencies. My understanding is that different agencies have implemented different technical means to do exactly what you're discussing.
Well, that's a problem right there.
Yes, Senator.
How about, you're in charge of this center. How about some uniformity of process?
So my understanding is that there's a current intelligence community review of the recent disclosure is underway at the moment, and that when that's finished, my expectation, were I to be confirmed, that through the role of the involvement of the National Insider Threat Task Force, that those lessons would be shared with different agencies. And then it's a matter of essentially shaming them into getting the job done.
General, I hope you're going to be astride a highly capable technical agency. I hope that it will have as one of its missions figuring out how to protect this information using, as you say, technical means. Is that, do you see that as part of your mission?
Yes, Senator. I think overall, the National Security Agency is relied upon to provide, if it's not within the specific role of the national manager for national security systems, it certainly is to provide advice on how best to use technology to protect our national security information.
Thank you both, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think good question, Senator King. I do think, at least in my conversations, that under General Nakasoni's leadership, and also, frankly, because the NSA has been the victim of so many of these issues, the notion of copying documents and walking out, they have taken corrective action. I think the rest of the IC can learn from. I don't think if Mr. Teixeira is ended up proven guilty that he would have gotten away at that at the NSA. Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, to both of you, thank you for your service to our country. And General Hoke, it's not just you, it's your family. And when you've deployed multiple times, your family is away from you. They put up with that. And so I want to say thank you to your family as well. Mr. Casey, you're probably not deployed in the same way as General Hoke has been, but and as several other members have indicated, putting up with a committee and working through the bureaucracy of Washington, D.C. for years and to do a number of successful items also says a lot about your capabilities as well. So thank you to both of you. I want to begin with General Hoke. I share the admiration that Senator King has expressed with regard to what General Nakasone has been able to accomplish. And part of this has been because he has taken on and has challenged the issues surrounding a dual hat. I happen to be a proponent of the dual hat approach. I think it works well. It's probably not perfect, but it's better than having separation and then having disagreements or silos in which you try to communicate back and forth. One of the areas that I felt had been very successful was the implementation of NSPM 13, which is, well, it's a classified document. It basically, in broad terms, would suggest a clarified way, a quick way in which to respond to foreign threats or opportunities for cyber intervention by us. And since that was intervened or approached, it has been an item making our cyber operations, I would consider to be much more successful. The question I have is, moving forward, NSPM 13, while modified slightly over the last 10 years or so, is still in effect. Do you believe that you need additional capabilities, or do you see additional capabilities that are necessary to continue your mission in terms of the dual-hatted approach that we expect today?
Senator, in my experience, there is a really good alignment between the law and what has been produced by the Congress, by our national policy, and by the authorities that have been given to U.S. Cyber Command, the National Security Agency. So I think what that then allows is complementary action under those sets of authorities that produce the best outcome of the nation.
One of those areas, as a number of the members here have talked about, is 702. Could you just briefly, because there's a lot of folks back home saying, what are they talking about? What is a 702? Could you briefly, in terms of the magnitude of the importance to the defense of our country, could you share in this open session a little bit about how critical and how much we use 702 authorities?
Senator, I think first and foremost, ensuring that the American people understand that this is an authority to collect against foreign persons overseas.
Just like once every month or so?
It is an extensively used, and it is an irreplaceable authority for the intelligence community.
Give me an example, if you could, the magnitude of the value of that program. Can you share that?
I will give you an example of
Yes,
the products that are produced for the President's Daily Brief. 100% of those that have SIGINT input have 702 reflections in them.
It's not an item that we want to lose, so we want to make sure that we protect and that members of the House and the Senate feel a great degree of comfort that the protections of American citizens' private information continues and is improved upon in the reauthorization. Fair statement?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. Mr. Casey, I'm just curious, you've had a chance sitting here to look at a number of different opportunities that we've had to improve or to look at the execution of counterintelligence operations. And while you would not be an operator of those, you clearly would be the overseer of a lot of them and the coordinator of a lot of them. Does the director of the NCSC have the necessary authorities to appropriately lead the CI enterprise? And that includes assistance to our private sector.
So thank you for the question, Senator. I think the committee's audits and projects team had a number of suggestions for improving that. If I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, I'd like to, frankly, take some time to look at it. And
I want you to go on a little bit. It seems to me that you've expressed in the past a real desire to perhaps make some repairs here. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement, sir.
How strongly do you believe in that? Tell me, how serious is it that this has got to be done?
100. So I think we've all sat here before and talked about the threats that we're facing from the PRC, from Russia, to thefts of intellectual property. Like, the United States is facing an across-the-board threat by a whole of society, to say nothing of terrorists, hackers, the usual gamut. And it is extremely urgent that we get a system in place that works on every possible level to protect against all those threats.
Including those against private enterprise.
Absolutely. And in fact, that's been a priority of the PRC. And it, as I think I said in my opening statement, that threatens our current economic success in the future. And as the chairman's pointed out more times than I can count, if the Chinese are able to, frankly, get ahead of technology, start setting the international standards, over time that locks us and Western Europe and the Japanese and South Koreans not only out of the game, but plays to our disadvantages and affects our personal freedoms.
Thank you. My time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rounds. Senator Casey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank both the nominees for your, as Senator Rounds said, your service to the country, your willingness to continue in service of the nation. This Casey will not have questions for nominee Casey at this time.
Deeply disappointed, sir.
But we might later. But General, I want to thank you for taking time to sit and talk as we did, and I'm noting for the record your Lehigh University credentials, among others. We're grateful for that. I just have one comment and then two questions for you, General. One is I won't reiterate or ask for reiteration of the questions pertaining to 702, but like so many of us, I think virtually every one of us, we've seen, because of the briefings we've received, the benefit of 702, and it's a critical set of authorities for our ability to keep the nation safe, and I don't think I have to reiterate that anymore, but we have to keep making that case. But the question I had was, and I'm referencing your testimony on page 2, you talked about in the third full paragraph on page 2, the value of partnerships, and you say, in reference to, in particular, Russia and the People's Republic of China, you say, quote, NSA's ability to work in collaboration across the interagency, the private sector, and foreign partners is one of the agency's greatest strengths and critically important to our nation's success in a world of accelerating change, unquote. Here's the question. Obviously, NSA has a focus on both of those nations and the threats posed by them. So how do you plan to continue to lead that effort to adapt both the mission and the capabilities of NSA in order to focus on those two threats?
Senator, in terms of how we think about partnerships, it's really the men and women of the National Security Agency, the ability to create advantage for those other interagency partners. They all perform critical roles for our nation, but NSA is providing both foreign intelligence and cybersecurity foundational to the other activities that we do, both within the department and within the interagency. When we think about foreign partners sharing those common threats, how do we work with them to also ensure that our nation is secure, but also enabling them where we have shared interests to be able to defend against malign activity, whether that's in cyberspace, whether it's disinformation, or it's some other coercion, and be able to provide insights and be able to enable resilience to those activities. So as we think about partnerships, it really is about how to make others effective and to be able to ensure that we're doing the best thing for the national defense by leveraging our authorities, doing it in a very legal and compliant way with our laws, policies, and values.
Thank you. And I know that you share the real concern we have about both the threats posed by both Russia and the People's Republic of China. Last question is this. One of the areas of focus for me on the committee, as I've tried to do across a number of committees and jurisdictions that I serve on, is the intelligence community's efforts to both create more accessible facilities and implement assistive technologies in order to enable people with disabilities to contribute to the IC's mission. Talk to me about that and the efforts you can continue to undertake in that area.
Well, Senator, I think this is an area that NSA has been one of the leaders in the community, ensuring that we have the talent that can do the highly technical, very mission-focused set of activities that go on at the National Security Agency. NSA has been very successful to go across the country and to be able to tap into the talent that exists both within disabled and neurodiverse communities to be able to do very important missions for our nation. If confirmed, I look forward to be a part of that and to be able to continue that and continue to grow it.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Casey. I appreciate you raising that last issue and thought it was appropriate you mentioned the community that, frankly, I had to get educated about in terms of neurodiverse and what a role they can play. I appreciate you raising that. Senator Jill Rand.
General Howe, thank you so much for your service. You're taking on a very big job, and we're very grateful for it. In response to additional pre-hearing questions, you discussed the collateral benefits for the protection of commercial networks outside the defense industrial base, which come from NSA's engagement with the private sector. In a time of war, do you feel confident that our civilian digital infrastructure, to include emergency services, can be sufficiently protected by the current commercial providers, or are there adjustments to your authorities needed to use NSA and cybercom capabilities to protect things like hospital networks, public utilities, and other critical infrastructure?
Senator, I think that the national cybersecurity strategy starts to lay out that framework in terms of how we collaborate across the U.S. government with state and local partners. And I think NSA will have a critical role to play, particularly with our teammates in DHS, the FBI, to be able to put us in the best position as a nation to be able to do that defense. But I do believe there's work to be done.
I would imagine some of that work would include what happened in Guam most recently.
And Senator, I think it's a really good example because understanding what the threat is and now being able to inform that threat, and NSA's role from the National Manager of National Security Systems will certainly be at that table to partner with all the other elements of the U.S. government with INDOPACOM as the element that's responsible from a Department of Defense perspective to understand the threat and then be able to work solutions collaboratively with both the local all the way through the other federal partners.
I think it's just a very apt example because if the civilian-owned infrastructure is taken down, you can't complete operations, especially if it's critical infrastructure in the United States. And without the review and analysis of what risks we have and what vulnerabilities we have, we will not be prepared to protect, defend, and be able to continue to use all the infrastructure we need in the United States to project worldwide.
Senator, if confirmed, I look forward to partnering with our teammates in DHS and also within the elements in the department as we look at defense critical infrastructure.
Thank you. As a member of this committee and the Armed Services Committee, I've seen firsthand oftentimes it is intelligence relationships and military relationships with other countries, sometimes developed confidentially, which produce some of the biggest results in our bilateral relationships. Our ability to develop robust coalitions is crucial to safeguarding our national interests. But when we operate together, sometimes we're only as strong as our weakest link. Being mindful that we are in an open setting, can you discuss any work that you've done to date to raise the cybersecurity acumen of our partners, and what types of enhanced cooperation would you like to have would you like to advance if confirmed?
Senator, I do have a lot of experience in this area. Previously was the commander of the Cyber National Mission Force when we initiated the Defend Forward operations, which based off authorities from Congress and then from the executive branch. This allowed us to now go and be able to partner with other nations to be able to identify threats on their networks collaboratively, and really allow us to do two things simultaneously: put pressure on one of the other nation states that were attempting to influence that nation, and also allow them to get a deeper understanding of our tradecraft and how we do that every day. Additionally, I think what we have seen as part of the overall coalition to support Ukraine is a collaboration of nations that has had to do that together on networks that also we had to spend significant time with European Command and NATO to ensure that those networks that we're using collaboratively with each of those partners are cyber secure.
An example, just visited some of our assets in Portugal, and they had recent cyber attack that put NATO confidential materials at risk. That country still hasn't reached its 2% investment in military. One recommendation would be to really encourage our allies to choose that their investment will be in cyber capacity or in space capacity or in new intelligence capacity that's helpful for the alliances. Is that something you will endeavor to do?
Senator, we'll certainly, we have a great partnership with General Cavoli today. We'll certainly work very closely with General Cavoli on what capabilities the alliance needs.
Thank you. And then last, in last year's NDAA, I established and expanded in this year's NDAA a scholarship program for college students to gain education in cybersecurity and digital services with an ensuing service obligation to the Department of Defense or the IC. Do I have your commitment, if confirmed as NSA Director, you will welcome these students once cleared as part of your dedicated and trained workforce and do everything you can to support the Cyber Academy?
Absolutely, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Lynn. I also think you raise a very interesting point about other ways that our NATO allies could get to those requisite investments and frankly might actually be more valuable than another 50 soldiers.
Correct, which is why I wanted to highlight it to the future NSA Director, because he can lead that effort. It's also a way to project power with countries that want to align with us, that have enormous potential, like India. So military sales is typical the way we project power, but you can also do it through development of new capabilities in cyber, in space, in future technologies, with a different kind of industrial base.
I think very good point. Senator Ossoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Casey, thank you for your career of service to the Congress. Congratulations on this nomination. General Hoke, thank you for your service in the Air Force. Congratulations to you as well. One would have thought that after the Snowden affair, that hard lessons learned would have been applied consistently across DOD and the IC to prevent serious and preventable disclosures of classified information. But the recent unauthorized disclosures allegedly by an Air Guardsman in Massachusetts suggest to me that there remains, at least in pockets of the U.S. government, significant complacency and incompetence about the protection of classified information. So beginning with you, General Hoke, could you please detail to the committee how in this role, if confirmed, you will, with intensity and precision, use both your formal authorities and your influence and example to prevent such unauthorized disclosures which put U.S. national security at risk in the future?
Senator, protection of our classified information is paramount. If confirmed, the role that the DERNSA plays to be the national manager of national security systems, that sets the start point in terms of How do we secure those systems, and how do we monitor them? In terms of understanding threats, both as we think about foreign threats, but we do have insight in how to deal with insider threats. So if confirmed, I pledge to work with the other elements of the IC and within the department to help support efforts to ensure that our systems are secure.
And how about standardizing best technical practices?
We'll certainly be an advocate for that. Yes, Senator.
Mr. Casey?
Thank you for the question, Senator. If confirmed, the director of NCSC also plays a role in a number of different ways in helping to prevent insider threats. So one, the NCSC coordinates damage assessments when they're ordered to ensure that we capture what actually happened and what lessons we can learn from it. Secondly, the DNI and the AG co-chair, but the NCSC largely staffs the National Insider Threat Task Force that's charged with sharing best practices and encouraging agencies across the government to effectively implement security. And then finally, the in personnel vetting, which NCSC is, again, with DoD helping to lead the development and rollout of Trusted Workforce 2.0 to hopefully head off some of the insider, frankly, before they become insiders.
Mr. Casey, thank you. How will you characterize or measure success in your role if confirmed?
Thank you for that question, Senator. I think there's a few different ways that if I'm confirmed, I would measure success. One is the continued and hopefully successful rollout of Trusted Workforce 2.0. Second thing, I think we can do a better job of doing more coordinated outreach to the private sector and academia about the threats they're facing and ways they can mitigate it. And finally, the ultimate way of measuring success, as I think I was alluding to Senator Lankford, is when General Hoke gets SIGINT from some foreign adversary that it's too hard to operate in the United States and they're going to go somewhere else.
Thank you, Mr. Casey. General Hoke, with the immense capabilities that would be at your disposal as NSA director, of course, there emerge privacy and civil liberties concerns for American citizens. Will you pledge to be fully attentive to those concerns, both as a matter of law and as a matter of ethics and best practice, and fully candid with the committee when we bring questions to you on that subject?
Yes, Senator.
And General Hoke, of course, NSA Georgia, which will be a significant contributor to your efforts if confirmed, brings unique capabilities to the National Security Agency. Can you characterize the value of the contribution of the personnel at NSA Georgia and opportunities for growth you see at that facility?
Yes, Senator. In terms of my current role and in my previous roles, NSA Georgia is a critical part of the United States SIGINT system, and it's also very critical to U.S. Cyber Command in terms of the forces we've aligned with Army Cyber. The specific areas that I think are unique with NSA Georgia is NSA's combat support role, and that support to commanders in the field. NSA Georgia has been a leader, and I would expect that to continue and expand in terms of the demands to ensure that there's resilience across the United States SIGINT system, while also partnering and expanding training. The infrastructure that has now been built between the Cyber Center of Excellence and the work that NSA is doing at NSA Georgia is an opportunity for us to ensure that we've got the trained talent both within NSA and Cyber Command, and NSA Georgia will be significant to that.
Thank you both for your continued willingness to serve. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Ossoff. Senator King, you've been hung in here. You got another question? You sure? All right, I've got one last question. General Hoke, you're going to not be the victim of this question, but in reinforcing what Senator Lankford brought up about being on the record, you have repeatedly indicated that you are going to continue the efforts of this committee on security clearance reform and the whole process of security clearance. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. One way, and remember, I will remind you, you're on the record, one way that you could make that commitment, at least in my mind, more diligent would be a commitment that you will return John Rosenwasser's calls within 4 hours, regardless of where you may be, in country, out, or anywhere else. Is that?
If I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, sir, I'll certainly look at that issue and get back to you within 60 days.
I think I may borrow Senator Wyden's technique and ask you to give a fulsome response to that in writing.
He'll give that question all the consideration it deserves.
Thank you, Senator King.
Well, once again, Angus King coming to your rescue. Well, let me thank both of you for your testimony, and I appreciate Senator King hanging in. You both have, eminent qualifications for the jobs you've been nominated for. I want to thank, as I think other members have mentioned, the fact that your families are both here. These are tough jobs and tough careers to take on. We appreciate and support their service as well. And I do want to just note on a personal basis how proud I am that of you, Mike, and the fact that so many colleagues of their own volition and on their own time, former colleagues came up here to show support for you. I think that speaks volumes.
Thank you, sir. I suspect they had mixed motives, so.
Well, we are going to hold you on the Rosenwasser thing. And General Hoke, we're going to, I think Senator Langford made a very good point, and you will have no better allies than this committee on a totally bipartisan basis. But some of the most disappointing times in my tenure here has been when someone, not to say on purpose, but by whatever reason, had information they didn't share. It then came out, and yet they'd appeared before the committee in a time previously. So leaning in, and if it needs to be done in a classified setting, we will understand that. But leaning in to make sure that you share and trust us, we will be that kind of partners. Final comments of this, and this may be a record, and I want to thank Vice Chairman Rubio for his cooperation on this. If any members of the committee wish to submit questions for the record after today's hearing, please do so no later than noon on Thursday, July 13th. Chris, I'm not sure you ever had a turnaround that quick, but so that gives you less than 24 hours, but I'm grateful for the Vice Chairman's cooperation to see if we can move this proceeding along. Again, Mr. Casey and General Hoke, thank you for appearing before the committee today. Thank you as well to your families. They should all be proud of you, and good luck going forward. We are adjourned.